Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the Warrior Novium Pro stick review. So we have all these other sticks here because these are kind of, you'll see when you watch the review. This is Warrior's newest stick. It is a mid-kick, which they kind of dumped out of. So they had their old Dynasty sticks. The HD one was the last one. This kind of brings back that, not family, because it's obviously not a Dynasty. It's instead this Novium Pro. But it brings back kind of the idea. It has this crazy bevel taper. Their logo for it right there. And you can see the cool kind of logo for it right here as well. But you can see how crazy this taper looks and how the sides are, basically goes inward. So you gain 2 extra sides on it and you gain an extra edge on the stick, and it really goes inwards, as you can see, like that, where the taper is. And this stick is a mid kick, so this part is all very stiff. So before we jump into this review and talk about everything, this review wouldn't have been possible without the help of Hockey Supremacy. If you're in Canada and you're buying any hockey equipment, check out the links in the description to Hockey Supremacy. Click those links and make a purchase. Gives me a kickback as well as shows them support that this video was helpful and you want to see more content like that. Otherwise, support the channel, check out Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything through those links always come back into the channel so I can keep making more content and doing more reviews. So like I mentioned, the Novium Pro is the mid kick, and the Alpha LX Pro, which I don't understand why Warrior didn't put the Pro like next to the logo. It's always really odd to me right there, but it's right there, was their mid-low. They changed it. It used to have the covert line was low, Dynasty was the mid, and then this, we moved it lower because the market says everyone wants lower, so we moved the kick lower, but it's not quite as low as a covert and doesn't quite have that crazy taper, which is on the coverts. Their saber taper on the Alpha. So I didn't review this stick. I didn't look at this stick. I had the original Alpha QX, which I thought was pretty bad, and then the DX, which was a big improvement. I didn't touch this stick, but I wanted to touch this stick because of the blade, the Fuel Core Ultra blade, and this is the blade they're using on all their sticks, and that's also the blade that is used on the Warrior Novium Pro, which we'll talk about later on in the video, but that's why this stick is here. So mid kicks and also a mid kick, and we're going to compare them and kind of go through everything. This stick is basically all power. That's all they advertise for: hard shots, hard loading shots, everything like that. We'll talk about shooting later on in the video, but for the most important part of this stick is the graphics, which are one of the more understated looks I think right now on the market, which is, even it has this like crazy chrome logo, which is saying something, but the looks on this are okay. They're not fantastic. I like the chrome like ish logo and the cool colors that come on there, and it looks really good going right through the middle of the logo with that taper. But the rest of it, like Novium, you can't even see the text right here, which is, I mean, I guess that's what they're going for, right? It's kind of that blacked out look. And then you have some details up here. So it's clean. It's definitely a very clean looking stick. It's interesting, I guess. It's just not, doesn't blow me away or anything. I do like the red on the underside as well, just showing off that Warrior logo going along with the taper kind of shape right there. And you have some like details up here for the tech specs and everything like that. There are some kind of cool little details right here, like that Bevel Taper logo right there, but nothing crazy or stands out. Overall, it's all right. It's just pretty understated, which is fine, especially when there's a lot of flashy sticks. You kind of know what it is when you see it, but at the same time, it doesn't really stand out. I think the Novium, they could have had that text somewhere so you actually know what kind of Warrior stick it is. But I mean, if you're really a gear nerd and looking at it, you'll know based on just the color of the Warrior here. So, and the use of the red, unless it's a custom stick, which Warrior does do for pros. So it's fine. Nothing special or crazy there. Going on to the tech specs of this stick, you can kind of see them lined up right here. So you have the bevel taper, which I showed off. You have their Minimus Carbon 25, and whatever, that's the blade, obviously. I don't really care about that details. The point of that in this Minimus Carbon is you can see the actual carbon weave through it, and it's a 25K carbon fiber, and you can see it going through the whole stick, and you can see it on the blade as well. Now, something that is interesting about the Novium compared to the Alpha and also the QR5 Pro, those use Minimus Carbon UD, which is the unidirectional or unidirection, whatever. And what that is it's a weave. There's no weave at all. It's just carbon laid flat, and it's going through, like, that's the carbon right here. You can't really see anything in here, but that is the carbon fiber, and it's just strands going one way instead of being laid in a weave. I've gone over this material before with the QR5 Pro and talked about it as well. And before, you can kind of see it hopefully a little better right there. You can kind of see the carbon stuff right there. And you can definitely see like the joint of the fuel core blade with the that's the UD, that's the 25K. So hopefully it gives you an idea of it right there. So I've gone over the UD in the past in other videos. I'm not going to reiterate it here, but the stick here with the UD is made in Mexico, and the Novium is made in China, but it is unfortunately under my tape job. I'm not untaping it just to show you a logo that says made in China. Just trust me on this. The other thing that came from China the last time was when Warrior did their Phantom stick. That was also minimus carbon 25. So interesting that the UD sticks from the LX are made in Mexico, and then the newest Novium is made in China. So this isn't a full release of sticks either. This is basically just, I think, the Novium Pro, Novium Senior, I think, and then maybe an intermediate one. There's no like 4 or 5 different stick lines where the LX or the LX, LX 20, 30, whatever, right? So kind of interesting in that regard. But the other thing to note is there are Warrior sticks, like the covert lines, like the SEs, the SLs, the DX, and even the Alpha DX, like S Superlights and stuff like that, that are made in China and not Mexico. So it's basically usually the second run of them. So you can just check for the label to see where it's made if that matters to you. And more, you'd see that label right there when you look here, but you don't. So that's another way to check right there. Doesn't actually tell you that it is made in Mexico because it's made in China. The taper of this stick is very unique in the sense that it kind of goes inwards, as you can see, and it gives you that extra edge all the way through there. So you do get an extra, obviously, edge and a sort of extra sides if you want to go really specific. And you can see it is on both sides. When you look at it from the top, it really doesn't do anything different because it really is on the side itself. And when we take a look at here, you can really see how this kind of ends up working out. And this taper is extremely stiff. So we'll talk about that in the shooting aspect of this. But that is a very unique part, and Warrior is calling it their Bevel Taper. Something very different compared to what we've seen previously on Warrior 6, where it tapers out in like more of a shape here. Like on this old covert, where you can definitely see it getting, like, this is their dagger taper, as you can see. So it gets a lot thinner as it goes down, as you can see right there. And then Warrior has, now the covert line has multiple sides down there as well. But this one is a lot higher than that. As you can see, it's more up here. And it serves a totally different purpose, specifically to stiffen this section. So it's a very interesting piece there. It looks awesome when you look at it. It's a very unique hockey shaft shape, and kind of the opposite. We've seen a Bauer where they kind of bow outwards. This one is going inwards. Now going on to the grip of the stick, and Warrior is doing this thing again where it does feel like the grip is kind of integrated into the graphics of the stick. And you can kind of see how there's like no real texture grip at the underside, and it always stops kind of where the full graphics go. Then you see like the graphics right here. You can see those black lines and how they have a grip to them, like the texture part to them. So all that black lines is basically texture, and then it does continue going through here. So I'm not 100% sure though if this is a thing with the past Warrior sticks where they use the actual graphic itself is what is doing the grip, because you can see right there, the grip does continue through the text where there are no lines. So I'm not sure how, if Warrior is doing that still again, or you have to apply it differently, but it does stop the texture part right here. Once it goes into the taper, it's still grippy, but the texture part basically stops right here. And you can kind of see the point right here where that grip, or the texture, I should say, really stops on it. And it does go on the top as well, as you can see there. And then the grip stops like down here, like most sticks are doing now, but it does have that grip all the way through. Now, the grip quality on Warrior stuff is not super, I don't think. I still feel like it's pretty thin and it doesn't grip super well, but it's a unique Warrior feeling. It's been like this for a while. You can see some chips and everything on mine. I didn't use this stick a whole lot, just enough to be able to do the review and stuff on it and talk about it, but you can definitely see like the chipping on here, but that will happen on all sticks. So there's nothing crazy going on with this, and I don't really feel like there'll be any durability concerns in terms of the grip or anything like that. Once we put our single layer Nash Palm testing glove on for grip feel, you basically barely feel the texture on it. You can definitely notice it. And remember, this is a single layer Nash Palm, so I'm gonna notice this a lot more than most retail gloves. So I can feel it, but it's like, it's so thin that it's not really making a difference of when I'd be using it. I wouldn't really notice it going like this. It's not making a huge difference. It's not really giving you much texture. And when you're sliding it like this, you notice it a lot less. When I put my finger on it like this and actually drag it, that's when I start to kind of notice it. But overall, don't really notice it, and it's kind of disappointing. I'm kind of harping on Warrior about this again and again because I really think they could do so much better with their grips in terms of like textured and stuff. They used to have amazing grips on their sticks, like the fish piece right here. I think it was called a fish scale or fish bone or something right here on the edge, and that felt great and it was really unique, and it is fantastic, and it's gone. And Warrior hasn't really kept the quality of grip up, I feel, going forward. Pointing, other companies have kind of brought theirs back up to that level, like CCM recently, so I would like to see Warrior do that as well. So for shaft shape, this is always hard to show off on camera, so I kind of apologize for the awkwardness. This is a very square shaft with round, it has rounded corners, but it's still a square kind of corners. It's not like a total square, it's still rounded, so it's not uncomfortable, but it's a very square shape overall, where the Alpha here is concave sidewalls and a lot more rounded corners. It's a lot, I'm not gonna say comfortable, but you definitely notice this like kind of go into your fingers a lot more, where this one is a lot more square. And people often say for marketing things, the squarer it is, the more their hands will be locked in. I mean, it's square, and you can definitely notice it's square all the way through, and it just definitely feels like that in your hands. But again, this is always a really hard thing to get off on camera, so hopefully you just kind of believe me on it. It reminds me of those old Supreme sticks, which were very square, and they obviously you round the corners, but it's a lot more of just a square shape overall than more the newer sticks. And continues down here, which makes sense because that is kind of what the mid kicks always had, was that square shape. And then when you went to the low kicks and the hybrids, they were a lot more rounded. So now all about weight. I always say the weight doesn't matter on a stick. It's all marketing. They're just trying to get lower numbers so they can say they're a lighter stick and stuff like that. And it's all about the balance. We'll talk about balance in a second. The weight on this stick, and a reason I'm kind of going against what I normally say, is because if a company markets a stick as a certain weight, especially when it's a low weight, and then the stick is nowhere near that weight, I'm going to call you out. So this stick is advertised in multiple places at 360 grams. So I don't know if this is a thing where companies and stores kind of had some miscommunication with Warrior in terms of weights, because I couldn't really find Warrior saying it was 360 grams. I found other places say it's 360 grams, but on Warrior's site, it doesn't give a weight, which I think would be a lot smarter. Now, this stick came in at 393 grams. Which is really far from that 360 and making me question things. The other thing is this Warrior LX has been out for a bit and is obviously not their newest and latest and greatest. So it's all sick. It's 387. So that's lighter than what the Novium is as well. There's always tolerance for stick weights and everything. Plus, I'm sure they weighed it without the end plug in it, but this is still not close enough to that 360 that has been advertised. Once again, I don't know if that is a thing where companies got wrong information, because there has been some wrong information about Warrior, the stick specifically, I should say, online. And as you can see with the blade, it does say Fuel Core Ultra. It's the same as what is on the LX, as well as the same as what is on the QR5 Pro. Now on Warrior's marketing stuff, originally it said Fuel Core Pro or something, and they said it was unique to the Novium. It's the exact same blade. I also reached out to Warrior and asked them because they had conflicting information, and they said, nope, it's the same blade that is on the Alpha and Covert. They're all using the exact same blade, and then they said they will be unique puck feel. We'll talk about that in a second, but I want to call this out because there is some weird marketing thing. So maybe that's where that number for the 360 grams is getting like miscommunicated. The weight on this stick is fine. It's within a realm of a fine stick. Like, it's close to all my new Bowers, all the new CCMs. It doesn't feel heavy when you use it, so it's not really an issue. But if you're advertising 360, which they are, and you come in at 393, that's pretty crap. Now for the important thing of balance, and this is where this becomes one of the weirdest sticks that I have reviewed recently, all because of this taper. So like I said, this stick is 393 grams, and I mean, sure, it feels like that, but the way that this stick is weighted feels way heavier than other sticks like this LX Pro, depending on where you hold it. So if you have one hand on the stick and you're holding it like this, it feels a lot heavier than the Alpha does, because all the weight on this stick is in this taper, specifically in this taper. And it basically feels like all the weight when you're stick handling everything is about right here. So normally when you're using sticks, you can really feel the blade of a stick. Like, you know that there's weight down here. It's obviously not in the center of mass. The mass is obviously down here. The weight is up here. So you notice this weight off the stick, and obviously the blade is like a decent amount of surface area, so there's weight because of this taper and how stiff this section is. So I'm assuming they reinforced this section with more carbon to make it stiffer. This is heavier than what you'd expect, and so when you're using it, this part feels like it doesn't exist. When you're stick handling And when I'm playing like this, all the time, I felt like the stick ended here. So I'd be like moving it and doing all these things, and the blade just didn't really feel like it existed. Multiple times when skating, I would be skating with my head up, stick handle with the puck, and I would just lose the puck. And I lost it because this blade ended up coming off the ice, because I felt like the weight where I normally would put a stick, what would have been on the ice, but because of the weight of the stick is so much higher, it just lifted itself off and I had the wrong balance point and everything. Obviously, this is something that you can get used to and you can adjust to, but I use a ton of sticks all the time, so I definitely notice a big difference between them when I am using them, and that is absolutely the case here. The other thing this kind of feels weird, a bit weird with, is when you're doing like the stick handling stuff, and I like to do the one hand test because you're pulling pucks away from people, you're pushing pucks away from people, especially because I play defense, so it makes a lot of sense. You have to reach in and pull pucks back. I found a lot of time, because of the weight, and when I'm holding the stick right here, the weight of the stick is so much on there, it's really like pulling the stick out. And even here, so you really got to go up, like it's not super high middle of the stick, but it's a lot higher than you're expecting. And just the weight of this is so significant. When I would go to pull pucks from people and stuff, the blade felt like it would really hit the ice and then kind of bounce up because that weight was above the blade itself. So the blade had a more difficult time staying down compared to other sticks. I also found I could not bat pucks out of the air with this stick at all. This is still a max height blade. But again, because of that weight, it just kind of threw me off all the time. Once again, this is an adjustment thing and you can get used to it and everything. But I'm going to talk about how the balance of this is, especially compared to everything else, because it's a pretty unique stick in that sense and because balance is important. The Warrior LX Pro, which is this thing, feels ridiculously light when you pick it up compared to this thing. But just because the balance is all spread out through the stick a lot more. And honestly, a lot more feels like it's up here in the hands. So when you hold it at the top of your hand, it actually does feel lighter down lower, and it feels like it's heavier down here versus the Novium, because the Novium feels so much weight down here. Now, once you put your hand on this stick in the middle of here, it just feels a lot lighter overall than what the Novium does. The other thing is when you're stick handling and moving around with the Novium, if you're in your resting spot with your stick just at your chest, like this, my hands end up being like pretty far apart. I'm 6'3", so they end up basically being there. The second I start going to shoot and everything and that slides up, all that weight goes down here. So when I'm up here, it's pretty balanced and it feels like pretty fine. But once I go to shoot and everything, my hand slides up, that weight starts coming down on here and starts pulling down. But again, that weight is here, not on the blade. So it just feels kind of a weird balance point and a weird part to that. Now I have other sticks here because of specifically shooting and comparisons, but the AS3 Pro was a stick that was pretty like super light when it came out, and this thing still feels way lighter as well compared to that Novium, just because of that weird balance point as well. The stick also is a bit lighter, but the Novium is just like that balance point really kind of, I feel, throws it off, where this thing feels kind of just lighter overall. But you definitely notice the blade feel this and that LX compared to that Novium because of that weight distribution. So next we go on to puck feel and pinginess. And like I said, Fuel Core Ultra Blade. Warrior actually told me that this blade will feel different than what is on the LX Pro, even if it's the same blade, because of the construction of the stick. I don't really agree. I also saw people online say the Novium feels like it's stiffer and there's more pop on the blade, even though they're the exact same blade. So I kind of disagree, and I'm going to say why. One, they're the same blade construction. So puck feel and everything is pretty much going to be the same from the blade itself. When you're doing puck tests and everything, am I testing with the different pucks, including this one, the wooden ball, the Zeno puck, and like doing the different tests with like saucing and passing and stuff with these two sticks. And I also had taped up the LX Pro to make it totally fair. When doing all these tests, they feel the exact same. But because this part of the stick is so much stiffer that you don't feel this part flex whatsoever. So when you're making a play and when you're like accepting a pass, making a pass, or specifically in shooting, the stick almost feels like it is pingier. And this is where people are saying the blade feels stiffer because they feel like there's more pop off it and it doesn't open up. It's not the blade opening up, it's the shaft not flexing at all because there's zero flex down here. So when they're making that play, this thing is staying totally still and they're feeling that kind of transfer into here and this blade not moving whatsoever and staying a lot more sturdy than on the LX, where when they make that play, this is going to flex. You're going to feel that flex, and they're attributing it to the actual blade here. When you do like stick handle things with pucks and you make like soft saucing when it's not going to flex and stuff like that, the blade feels absolutely identical. So yes, you are feeling a bit of a difference when you're shooting and everything, but it's because of the entire stick itself, not actually the blade. The blades are the exact same, but people I find have a hard time translating what's happening on a whole stick compared to what is just a blade. And I feel like that is something I've done in the past with the Warrior QX, because I said year after I reviewed it that the blade felt like it was opening up a lot, but really I feel like that was the bottom of like the taper itself was opening a lot more than I was expecting it to. So the blade would be more like this because the stick was flexing and I would start missing shots high right. But it wasn't because of the blade opening up. It was just what it felt like. Really, it's a shaft flexing and it kind of feels like the blade is doing that. So I want to clarify that on this stick specifically. It's the same blade. It feels the same and it's not changing anything there. I really feel like this is a missed opportunity with Warrior using this, and they should have gone back in their history and what a ton of NHL pros are using instead of going with this Field Core Ultra. And they should have used the blade that was on the old coverts, actually on all their sticks basically, and that a lot smaller weave. So you can see how much smaller that weave pattern is right there. And that is going to give you a heavier stick overall. Generally, that's why you go to a bigger K for weaves. It's less overlap and less use of fibers, so you can get lighter weights and everything like that. So I really think they should have gone with this blade because a ton of their pros are still using it. And that would have brought more weight down here, which would have, I think, affected that balance in a positive way. Would have made the stick a bit heavier, but you're already at 393 anyway, so you're already a heavy stick. Add 10 grams, whatever extra this is compared to that, maybe it's 15, and you're going to get one, a unique blade feel, which Warrior does not have across their line. All their blades feel the exact same. And two, you're going to get a better balanced stick, so I wish that too. The other thing is, I really do feel like Warrior kind of lost their puck feel out of their old blades, and I really liked how Warrior's old blades felt, and it was very unique feeling. I feel like Warrior's kind of lost that going into Field Core Ultra. Warrior says they still have their same blade feel between the Ultra and their old blade, but I don't believe it. And the other thing that kind of leads into me not believing that is how many pros are still using this old blade and haven't gone on to the new one. So when you look at NHL players using the Warrior sticks, it's kind of very obvious to see if they're using like an actual LX or actual QR5, because, or even a Novium, you can just see if you see any of this weave, the tight weave, it's not a new stick. It's one of the old sticks. You can't really see a weave through there. So I really think Warrior could have done something interesting here, could have gone back to this for this stick specifically, made a different feeling blade, and would have helped balance as well and kind of done something pretty interesting on this stick. Otherwise, it's kind of just sharing the blade over the whole families, and I think that's kind of missing an opportunity. So overall blade feel of the Warrior is kind of in between what the AS3 Pro is. Again, I don't have a 5, I haven't been able to use a 5, and I never got to use a 4. So I have to go based off the 3, which is extremely pingy and very stiff feeling throughout the blade, where it is the exact opposite. These two, this one is which is the Bauer Sync and just their Nexus line. This one feels more dampened than a Geo does, so it's even more so in that sense. The Warrior is kind of in that middle family. This is what I said about the QR5 Pro. I feel like it's more towards what the Tax is than what the Nexus is. It's very far away from what Nexus is in that puck feel. So it's more in lines with what CCM sticks are kind of going towards than what this specific Bauer stick is going towards, but it's not as pingy as the Hyperlight is. So it's kind of in between these two other, which this is a hybrid kick, but like it's kind of in between these two, and it's more closer to a jet speed than I think this. Now, before we jump into shooting, if you want to help support the channel so I keep doing more reviews and making more videos and doing like actual stick reviews and not just reviews like in my basement, please check out the links in the description. If you're in Canada, to Hockey Supremacy, from the US to Pure Hockey. Clicking those links and making a purchase gives me a kickback to help support the channel so I can make more content and do more videos. Otherwise, check out Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything that goes through those links always comes back in the channel so I can keep buying more gear and doing real reviews. I don't get sent any of this stuff really, so I have to buy it in order to make the real reviews, and not just all help would be greatly appreciated. Now onto the important part of this stick, which is shooting. And this is obviously a mid kick. Their whole advertisement is power, 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 power. And so this is very obviously not a stick that is advertised or really designed for me. This is a stick which you have to load, and they talk about that a lot. They talk about how you have to make sure it loads. and you have to really load the stick to get a shot off. And it's very true. I brought these sticks out here because this one kind of reminded me of some of the things out here, or we do direct competitors. The LX, let's get it straight out of the way, is so much easier to shoot in basically all regards. It has such a quicker release with, you put a lot less effort into actually shooting the stick, and it's a lot easier to shoot. I couldn't take a slap shot with this, so I couldn't do slap shot comparison with this one because this isn't my stick and I just borrowed it for a bit compared to this one. So we're going to get rid of this one off the table just because this comparison kind of stops there. And then we get to why this 2S Pro is back on this table. At one point, Bauer Supreme sticks really were basically the king of the mid kick and the people who had absolutely thundering shots, and not just slap shots. They also had unbelievably hard wrist shots, and they would just step into things and it would fly off their stick. I play against a couple guys that use Supreme sticks still, or just mid kicks in general, and their shots are cannons. It's never that quick release you're kind of expecting people do with really in tight with their feet. It's basically always loaded, and they have excellent technique, and their shots are rockets. The majority of sticks have kind of gone away from that. You have to load the stick in order to really get a good shot off. I feel like the 2S Pro was one of the last ones on that. The ultrasonic, which we have here, which was generally kind of a failure considering Supreme sticks don't exist anymore, was a lot easier to load and shoot and way easier for quicker releases. Not necessarily that it was good for quick releases, but you could still get a lot quicker releases with this stick off compared to the 2S Pro. 2S Pro took a lot of effort. You had to be really good at it, and you had to be like a good technique, and you had to make sure you loaded it, and it worked really well for that, and slap shots came off really, really hard and heavy and fast. This stick kind of removed some of that effort it took to shoot with, but slap shots were still very good. Which brings us to the Novium, which slap shots are awesome. Shooting this thing, I was putting absolute rockets off of the stick with a slap shot, and it did take a bit of adjustment going from just the other sticks I was using to this, but once I kind of dialed it in after a few shots, I was just launching sticks with slap shots off this. And I was very impressed with how hard the slap shots were coming off of this stick. It was as good as the ultrasonic and the 2S Pro were. It was, I would say it's even better than those. It was comparable to the AS3 Pro, which I think currently is basically one of the best slap shooting sticks. I unfortunately don't have an ASV to test or an AS4 Pro to test. Hopefully I'll be able to test a V in the future. But the Novium compared with that ASV, when you really release a shot hard with slap shots, and it was just absolute cannon off the stick. With that said, every other shot was considerably a lot more difficult to happen. I'm not going to say worse, because if you load it correctly and you really get it off, it's an excellent shot. Don't, and you're looking for a quick release where you can't really load it correctly, you can't get the total correct technique down, and you're just trying to fire something on net really quick, this stick is not the stick at all, and it does not do that well whatsoever. The AS3 Pro is so much more forgiving than what the Novium is. They feel night and day as overall sticks are. If I quickly got a puck where I had to shoot it really quickly and it wasn't quite in the right spot where I could really load the stick, the shot was terrible with the Novium, just kind of how it is. I kind of had to hesitate, wait for it to get like right in the right spot, or move the puck right in the right spot, transfer that weight and shoot, and it would be a good shot. But because of that extra step, I would lose so much quick release and like the ability to shoot really like off stride or like just off balance and everything with the Novium compared to the AS3 Pro and like sticks I use more often, which is like jet speeds and triggers and stuff like that. This isn't to say it's a bad stick and not to say it's a bad shooting stick. It just requires the correct technique and shot type for it to really work. If you are at all looking for a quick release and something that you don't have to really pay much attention to shooting, this isn't the stick for you. If you have an absolute cannon and you've been using Supreme and old tacks, like AS1 tacks was, I hated that stick basically because it was so hard to shoot and you had to really like load it up. This is absolutely a stick for you. So if you're a big fan of those old Bauer Supreme sticks that they don't really make anymore for you, or just older mid kicks, this stick is basically the new version of that, and bringing those sticks to like the new next level where like the tacks became easier to shoot. This isn't easier to shoot. It takes that effort. So remember that. Still shoots really well and shoots hard, especially slap shots, but you have to load it properly and you have to really put weight behind it and really shoot that stick. This whole bottom piece is so rigid that it's doing absolutely nothing. And sure enough, all the top is, well, I say the top, all the top, but above here is where that stick is flexing. The stick is not for me whatsoever. at all. I had so many times where I would go for a shot with this and I'd take a shot and it would just not be nearly good enough. And I'm like, man, if I had that jet speed or if I had the AS3 Pro, but that's my style, right? So you have to figure out if this works for what you're looking for. I have a feeling a lot of the younger generation, this is not going to be what they're looking for, because like Warrior had said with the Alpha line coming out and them killing the Dynasty line, all shooters, basically the market is kind of going to a lower and lower kick and quicker release. This is not that whatsoever. One thing about shooting the stick, and another reason why I wish they got rid of this and kind of put a different blade on it, when you are taking those slap shots, I do feel like this blade transfers quite a lot of like pinginess into the shaft and into your hand, so you definitely feel it. I do think that was the same way as the Tax too. The Tax blade at AS3 is super pingy, so it definitely transfers right into your hands. So I kind of wish this was a more like dampened feeling blade compared to other things. Overall, Warrior has a pretty interesting product here. I'm not really sure why it exists. I'm happy when companies kind of make a decision and then think, oh, maybe we made a mistake, and kind of reel back. It's kind of what this is. The Dynasty line doesn't exist because of that Alpha line, because they wanted a lower kick. Well, now they went back to a mid, so interesting. The reason I don't really understand what the point of this stick is and like kind of where it's going is just because this is a made in China version versus all their other top end releases, which are basically made in Mexico, except their like Phantom stick, which was made in China. So is this like a limited edition only coming out 1 year type thing, is what I'm kind of interested about. I definitely like how this stick is another option, specifically because Bauer did kill off the Supreme line, so there is no mid and high kick anymore from Bauer. So now you're with CCM, and Warrior now has another option in there as well. So I like how that's a thing, but at the same time, I don't really feel like it's pushing any real boundaries. It's a really good slap shot stick, and that's fine, but I still don't think it's like head and shoulders above Tax, if even better than Tax, and Tax is better for like everything else as well. I'm happy it's an option. I'm happy it's there, but I think they could have done more, as well as with that weight discrepancy between what they're advertising and what this is. I feel like it's a missed opportunity, or to be honest, it's flat out lying, and it's not even close to what the weight is what it's supposed to be. And obviously I do like the price point and how it's not a $400 Canadian stick and it's still $360, which is great. So thanks for Warrior for not raising that. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully it was helpful. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram and TikTok. Links are in the description. If it was helpful, please reach out to Warrior on social media and let them know this video was helpful and you greatly appreciate it. I had to buy this stick still with the help of Hockey Supremacy, so it's still expensive and it costs money for me to do all these reviews. So if you want to support the channel and you live in the United States, check out the link in the description to Pure Hockey. If you're in Canada, check out Hockey Supremacy. Clicking those links, making a purchase gives me a kickback, so I can keep making more videos like this and making more content. Hockey Supremacy helped out with this stick, but I still have to buy it, so it's still expensive, and it would be greatly appreciated so I can keep making more videos and doing more reviews. Otherwise, check out Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything that goes through those links always comes back in the channel, so I can keep buying more gear and doing real reviews. I don't get sent any of this stuff really, so I have to buy it in order to make the real reviews, and not just all help would be greatly appreciated.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.